By the time Richard and Susan Walker realized what had happened, the money was already gone. Not stolen by hackers, not taken by scammers overseas, not lost in a stock market crash. It disappeared one signature at a time across a polished oak desk from a man they had trusted for nearly 2 decades. The worst part? They thanked him for it. Because in retirement, the people who destroy your future rarely introduce themselves as enemies. Sometimes they introduce themselves as advisors. Richard Walker was 72, a retired electrical engineer from Columbus, Ohio. His wife, Susan, was 69, former elementary school teacher, 44 years married, 2 daughters, 3 grandchildren, a mortgage-free home, no debt, a retirement account worth just over $1.1 million. Not wealthy, not poor, exactly where millions of North American retirees hope to be. Safe, comfortable, careful, prepared. Or so they believed. For 18 years, their advisor had been Michael Reynolds, 56 years old, perfect hair, perfect suits, perfect smile. The kind of man who remembered birthdays, sent Christmas cards, asked about grandchildren by name. Richard called him family. Susan called her our financial son. That phrase would haunt her later. Then came 2026. Inflation headlines, bank failure rumors, market volatility, television experts arguing every night, recession warnings, political uncertainty, retirement forums filled with fear. Richard started checking the market every morning, then every afternoon, then every hour. Susan noticed. He stopped sleeping, stopped golfing, stopped talking about travel plans. One evening, he asked a question millions of retirees quietly ask themselves.
What if we run out of money?
The fear wasn't greed, it was survival. The fear of becoming dependent, the fear of becoming a burden, the fear of needing help from your children, the fear of outliving your savings by 5 years or 10. Michael Reynolds had an answer. He always had an answer. Michael leaned forward, lowered his voice, closed the office door.
Richard, I've been worried about your exposure for months.
Those words changed everything, because when an expert says he's worried, you become worried too. He showed charts, graphs, economic forecasts, worst-case scenarios, market crashes from decades earlier. Then he introduced the solution, a package of annuity products, protected, guaranteed, safe, reliable. His favorite word was simple.
Sleep, you'll sleep better.
Susan remembers that sentence perfectly, because for the next 2 years, sleep became impossible. Michael explained surrender periods, fees, restrictions, income riders, participation rates, complex terms buried inside hundreds of pages. Richard nodded. Susan nodded. Neither understood half of it. Neither wanted to appear foolish. Then Michael said something that ended the conversation.
If my parents were sitting where you are, this is exactly what I'd recommend.
The paperwork arrived. Richard signed. Susan signed. Michael smiled. The commission on that transaction alone would later exceed $60,000. They never knew. The first warning sign felt insignificant. Richard wanted $20,000. Their granddaughter had been accepted into medical school. He wanted to help. The withdrawal request came back with penalties. Unexpected penalties. Large penalties. Michael explained.
It's temporary. It's normal. Don't worry.
Months later, inflation rose again. Living costs increased. Insurance costs increased. Property taxes increased. Everything increased, except access to their own money. Richard became quieter. Susan became anxious. Then came the sentence every retiree fears.
We may need to adjust spending.
No more Alaska cruise. No kitchen renovation. No helping family. No flexibility. For the first time in 40 years, Richard felt trapped by his own retirement money. Their daughter, Emily, lived in Chicago, 50 years old, corporate attorney, practical, protective, suspicious. During Thanksgiving dinner, she asked a simple question.
How much are the fees?
Silence. Richard looked at Susan. Susan looked at Richard. Neither knew. Emily asked again.
What exactly are you paying for?
Again. Silence. 2 months later, she convinced them to meet another advisor, David Chen, fee-only fiduciary. No products, no commissions. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. David spoke carefully, slowly, respectfully. Then he removed his glasses, looked at Richard, and asked,
Did anyone explain these surrender charges to you?
Richard's stomach dropped. The room became very quiet. David explained that exiting early could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The products weren't fraudulent. They were legal, approved, common. But common does not always mean suitable. The more they reviewed, the worse it looked. Large commissions, long lockups, complex restrictions, products designed more for selling than understanding. Susan began crying. Not because of the money, because of the trust. 18 years. She repeated those words over and over. 18 years. Richard said almost nothing, because betrayal by strangers creates anger. Betrayal by trusted people creates shame. Richard requested a meeting. Same office, same desk, same coffee cups, same smile. Michael listened patiently, then defended every recommendation, every signature, every disclosure, every page. Technically, he wasn't wrong. The documents existed, the signatures existed, the disclosures existed. The law often asks, was it disclosed? Retirees ask, was it understood? Those are not the same question. Michael finally said,
You agreed to everything.
Richard stood. For a moment, he looked older than 72. Then he said,
No, I trusted everything.
The Walkers eventually restructured what they could. Some penalties were unavoidable. Some decisions could not be reversed. The financial damage hurt. The emotional damage hurt more. Richard stopped blaming Michael first. He blamed himself. That may be the cruelest part of advisor betrayal. Victims often become their own prosecutors. Susan disagreed.
You trusted someone you hired to protect us.
For months, they rebuilt confidence, not wealth. Confidence. And that recovery took longer. Today, Richard still keeps the business card. Not as a reminder of betrayal, as a reminder of responsibility. He tells friends one sentence whenever retirement comes up. If you can't explain it to your granddaughter, don't sign it. Not because advisors are bad, most are not. Many save retirements, many change lives for the better. But trust without understanding is not a retirement strategy. Some of the most expensive words in personal finance are, he's always taken care of us. Because sometimes the difference between guidance and sales is invisible until years later. And somewhere tonight, another retiree is sitting across another polished desk, listening to another reassuring voice, wondering if they're making the safe decision. Maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. The difficult truth is this: your retirement money may only need to survive one mistake, but your trust only needs to fail once. If this story reminded you of someone you love, have the conversation now while there is still time to ask questions.